studios of KPFK Pacifica Radio in Los Angeles, this is Uprising and I'm Sonali Kolhatkar. It's Friday, July 17th, 2015. The American Federation of Teachers endorses Hillary Clinton for president in a decision that has angered many rank-and-file members. We'll speak with Dr. Lois Weiner, who says the decision should be reversed. And we'll hear the words of Sandra Bland, a young African-American woman who died in police custody in Texas, plus an intimate profile of a young Black Lives Matter activist, Jasmine Richards, who's been targeted by police for her work. And police are increasingly arresting mostly black and brown folks for making threats on social media. Journalist Raven Rakia will explain. That's coming up after the news. Joining us now to analyze today's headlines is Christina Mislan. She's an assistant professor of journalism studies at the Missouri School of Journalism. Hi, Christina. A 24-year-old man attacked two military centers in Chattanooga, Tennessee yesterday, killing 4 U.S. Marines. The man, named Mohammed Yusuf Abdulaziz, first opened fire on a recruitment center for the military and then drove off and fired on a Navy Marine training center. Abdulaziz died at the center of the second shooting. It's not yet clear if he killed himself or was shot by police. Immediately, authorities speculated that the attacks may be linked to the Islamic State because of the timing coinciding with the end of the Muslim holy month of Ramadan. Also yesterday, a gunman shot 4 people in 2 cities in Maine. The identity of that shooter and the victims is not yet known. The main shooter remains at large, and state police have blocked traffic into and out of the town of Lee. Well, Christina, both of these incidents are very new. Very little is known so far, but of course the common denominator is the wide availability of firearms in the U.S. What do you think?
Yes, definitely. We definitely have an issue with the issue of firearms. We saw that with Dylan Roof, the shooting that happened in South Carolina. And so there's a huge problem in this country with people wanting to hold on to their guns and not understanding the messages that are being sent by the recent years in which massacres have happened. And so we have a huge problem with that hopefully President Obama right now on. But I do want to say one thing that is related to the gun violence, but this idea of terrorism. I think it's interesting that I was doing some comparison that when we're talking about white men who are going around and shooting people in churches and in public spaces, and then you have someone who seemingly might, is Muslim, then all of a sudden questions about terrorism there, but there aren't questions about terrorism in the other shootings. And so I think that's a question that we need to continue to raise.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, in an interview on MSNBC this morning, said he was, quote, very, very hopeful that Iran will release several U.S. citizens who are being held inside Iranian prisons. Kerry and President Obama triumphantly announced the completion of a historic nuclear agreement with Iran earlier this week. Kerry insisted on the interview that the issue of U.S. captives was constantly raised during the talks. Among those being held are Washington Post correspondent Jason Rezaian, as well as Saeed Abedini and Amir Hekmati. Meanwhile, WikiLeaks just released a trove of internal documents from Saudi Arabia that reveals the Sunni kingdom's obsession with undermining Iran, which is a majority Shia country. Saudi Arabia is one of the U.S.'s staunchest allies and top weapons buyer in the Middle East and is fighting a war in Yemen with U.S. blessing, where it accuses Iran of interference. Christina, should the release of the U.S. captives have been a top priority for Kerry in the Iran talks?
I think it definitely been kind of, maybe at the top. I think there are a lot of factors that need to be considered here, and there has been one conversation that has happened in the past year or so where the U.S. government has been kind of debating on the hostages, right? And when do you make deals and when do you make agreements? And so I think that I do think sometimes we have these conversations as if American citizens are the only important people that we have to consider. And so I think, we have to kind of have more of a global humanist perspective here. Let's think about all the people that the U.S. have detained from other countries, right? Or from in the country itself, right? And so I think we have to be careful about that conversation about American hostages. That's important, but at the same time, we need to
Unfortunately, we're having trouble hearing you, Christina, with your line. We might call you on the phone, but let's try this last question. Finally, right-wing evangelical activists are celebrating another stealth attack on the group Planned Parenthood. The heavily edited video, an undercover video which made waves in the media this week, is designed to show Planned Parenthood staffer Dr. Deborah Nucatola engaging in the business of selling aborted fetuses for medical testing. In reality, women who have abortions choose to donate their fetal tissue for important medical research, and the only costs associated with the transactions are for transportation. But the GOP-dominated Congress has already planned hearings in a first step to try to strip Planned Parenthood of federal funding yet again. House Speaker John Boehner went as far as to say yesterday, "I think I'd vomit trying to talk about the video." Well, Christina, I think I'm going to vomit over the Republican Party's disgusting tactics. What do you think?
I'm sorry. No.
Can you? Yeah, we'll take your answer on the phone. Go ahead.
Can you just
Yes, I was just talking about the hypocrisy of the Republican Party with John Boehner saying he'd vomit trying to talk about the video.
Yes. Well, as you know, that the Republican Party always can find it if you continue their attacks on
All right, Christina, unfortunately.
Right, and so I think, and it's important that, we think about what the importance of stem cells. We have to realize that this is actually going to causes where we're trying to find, or scientists are trying to find cures for diseases for people who are alive, who are dealing with lifetime illnesses. And so I think, again, we need to bring back a more progressive line of thinking here and kind of maybe ignore Boehner's wanting to vomit. And really, and obviously they want to vomit when it's convenient.
Right.
So we need to think about the importance of that. And so,
well, Christina, I want to thank you very much for joining us today. She is an assistant professor of journalism studies at the Missouri School of Journalism. This is Uprising. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Uprising. I'm Sonali Kolhatkar. The American Federation of Teachers on July 11th made a surprise announcement endorsing Hillary Clinton for 2016 president. In doing so, they violated an agreement between major labor unions to wait until at least July 30th to make any public endorsements. But many rank-and-file members also feel that they violated the trust of teachers who were not properly consulted. The Executive Council of the AFT apparently, quote, overwhelmingly voted for Clinton, but there was no referendum or public debate or discussion. During Clinton's last election campaign in 2007, the AFT waited until October to endorse her. The endorsement came at a time when the Clinton campaign's staffers were reportedly worried about the surge of support for Senator Bernie Sanders, who has made income inequality and higher wages a central part of his platform. The AFD decision highlights the weakening leverage that organized labor has had with the Democratic Party, offering their political support while receiving little in exchange. Joining me now is Dr. Lois Weiner. She is a professor in elementary and secondary education at the New Jersey City University, and she recently wrote about the AFT endorsement, saying it is an undemocratic decision that should be reversed. Welcome to Uprising, Lois.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us. Well, how exactly did the Executive Council make the decision? Who did they consult?
Well, the AFT posted on its website, it posted information about a poll and surveys. And ostensibly, the AFT Executive Council looked at the polls and looked at the surveys and then also examined interviews with the candidates. The candidates were interviewed by the AFT. But I don't think the AFT Executive Council is the union. So when you say how did the union make the decision? I would say the answer is a small number of officers who didn't have who hadn't consulted with their own constituencies, let alone the entire national union, made this decision, a decision that Randy Weingarten asked of them.
And Randy Weingarten is the AFT president. She is a longtime personal friend of Hillary Clinton's. And given that the AFT's executive council endorsed Clinton in 2007, we shouldn't necessarily be surprised by this decision, right? Perhaps just by the timing of it and the process of it?
Well, it's not an issue of surprise. I want to say that because I think the issue is expectations. And I think that union members and people in the society have the right to expect that in unions, the endorsement of politicians, especially for something like the president of the United States, is going to be done democratically. And so while I may not be surprised at the lack of democracy in the AFT, I'm outraged because I expect it. Because unions are supposed to be democratic organizations. And at a time when opponents of labor like to say that unions are run by union bosses, we need to be absolutely sure that the unions stand up to the highest standards of democracy. And this process was a travesty. The other problem is the choice of the nominee of endorsing Clinton herself, because Clinton stands behind the policies that the union ostensibly opposes, like high-stakes testing, creation of charter schools, marketization of public education. She represents powerful, moneyed elites in this country. And so if I were participating in that discussion, I would urge the union not to endorse Hillary Clinton. But the important point for me is that this decision was not made democratically.
Right. Now, you described the relationship between Randy Weingarten, AFD president, and Clinton as a public love fest. And there has often been, and for a long time been, a far too cozy relationship between top organized labor leadership and Democratic Party leadership, right?
Absolutely. And, the AFT, I think, is especially bad. I'm sorry, I can't find a better word. In this regard, because the AFT maintains close relationships with something called the National Endowment for Democracy. And if you look at the power structure of the National Endowment for Democracy, it really represents the right wing of the American power elite on issues of foreign policy. And Weingarten didn't support Obama in the last, when he was campaigning for the nomination. She was a Clinton supporter. And again here, what I want to say is it's absolutely irrelevant to me if Randy Weingarten is supporting Hillary Clinton because she likes her hairstyle, she likes her politics, or because she's going to be named she thinks she's going to be named Secretary of Education, or if Hill is just a good pal. Those reasons are absolutely irrelevant. Randy Weingarten is one person, and it is not her decision to make about whom the union should endorse. And frankly, the AFT Executive Council is as responsible as Weingarten is for this travesty, because the AFT Executive Council should have consulted with the constituent members before voting on this endorsement. And I think that every AFT member should contact members of the Executive Council, and their names are on the website. In California, Josh Peschel, who's president of the California Federation of Teachers, is a member of the AFT Executive Council. Every AFT member in California should be contacting the CFT And number one, ask Josh Pesholt how he voted. And number two, calling on him as a member of the AFT Executive Council to rescind the endorsement. I don't think we should accept this endorsement as being legitimate.
Now, Lois, how important are such endorsements? Do rank and file members actually follow their leaders, or and also, does the AFT and Clinton hope, or I should say, does Randy Weingarten and Clinton hope that the AFT endorsement will trigger or push other unions to do the same?
Well, that's the reason that there's opposition from other AFL-CIO unions for the early endorsement, because the AFT violated the early endorsement policy of the AFL-CIO. So, you're asking me an empirical question, which is how much weight does the endorsement hold? Clearly, Weingarten and union officials and Hillary Clinton and the other people who are vying for the nomination think that the union endorsement for the Democratic nomination is important. That's why they won it. Here again, I want to say what is important here. What is important is that the AFT Executive Council has committed AFT resources and the organization to a political course of action that its membership has not approved. And that's not right, and that's not democratic.
Now, organized labor's leadership has often, picked the Democratic candidate. We're in a two-party system that leaves few choices for the leadership. But in this particular case, there are a couple of other options within even the Democratic Party field. There's not just Bernie Sanders, but Martin O'Malley, both of whom seem to be much more to the left of Clinton. And in endorsing Clinton, hasn't the union also just given away their power instead of supporting her? Shouldn't they be making her and all the other candidates work for their endorsement? Isn't that the whole point?
Totally. Clinton hasn't given the union anything. But again, Sonali, what I want to say is that this is the discussion that should have occurred among union members. And so it's interesting and valuable for the two of us to have this discussion. But the key is that had this discussion occurred within the union, online, in its publications, at local union meetings, the membership would have been informed, the membership would have been involved, and anyone that the union ultimately endorsed would have had more powerful backing. So I think this process of endorsement, which is related to its being early, because obviously having a democratic decision takes more time, so the union couldn't have done it in exactly the same way. It bypassed democracy, and the union weakened itself, and it weakened the power of the endorsement. What it did was it strengthened the personal relationship between Weingarten and Clinton. And there we have the political problem of the AFT and many other unions, that the leadership and too many members think that if we just have warm, pleasant, cordial relations between a few people at the top and politicians, we'll get what we need. And clearly, that's not the case. Public education is being destroyed.
Finally, Lois, how have teachers responded? I understand that there's at least one petition where thousands have signed asking the AFT to reverse its decision.
Yes, and I urge people to sign that petition. I believe it was started by some teachers in Chicago. I'm not positive about that. But I really do urge people to sign that petition and to send it to other people that they know, regardless of which candidate they think the AFT should endorse. And I think that what's occurred is this has delegitimized the AFT leadership. And that's another reason that it's very important that the Executive Council rescind the decision, because they have the power to do that, and they should exercise that power.
And the petition can be found at change.org. We will post it to our website later today. Lois Weiner, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
My guest is Dr. Lois Weiner. She's a professor in elementary and secondary education at the New Jersey City University, and she recently wrote about the AFT endorsement of Hillary Clinton, saying it was an undemocratic decision that should be reversed. We'll put both the petition link as well as a link to her essay on uprisingwithsonali.com later today. This is Uprising. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Uprising. I'm Sonali Kolhatkar. Americans are demanding answers in the mysterious police custody death of a 28-year-old African-American woman from Illinois. Sandra Bland was driving to a job interview in Prairie View, Waller County, Texas, when she was pulled over by police for not using a turn signal while driving. A bystander videotaped Bland being held on the ground by two police officers screaming that they bashed her head into the ground and that she couldn't hear. What happened between her being pulled over and being on the ground with police arresting her is as yet unknown. 3 days later, Bland was dead. The Harris County medical examiner ruled her death a suicide by asphyxiation, and Waller County DA Elton Mathis said it appears she had used a trash bag to hang herself from a partition in the ceiling, which was used to give inmates privacy. But those who knew Sandra Bland well say that there was no possibility she killed herself. Many are now demanding to know what really happened to Bland. Her family in Chicago has planned a prayer vigil for her. Sandra Bland was very vocal on Facebook and closely followed the news and the activism of the Black Lives Matter movement. She is one of far too many black women who have mysteriously died in police custody. Today we play for you a video that she posted of herself on Facebook in April, criticizing the use of the phrase "all lives matter."
Good afternoon, my beautiful kings and queens. It is Wednesday, April 8th, 2015. Hopefully you are out there or were out there this morning doing something productive, successful, something that is going to help establish your kingdom and queendom. Today's Sandy Speaks is going to focus directly on my white people. White people, yes, black people know that all lives matter. But what I need you guys to understand is that being a black person in America is very, very hard. Although you all love to say, oh, nobody should see race, people are the reason that racism is still alive. Well, what kind of people are the reason? Black racists have no power, whereas white racists do. They have power because they are in positions of control, or they're in positions where they can influence the control over black people. Yes, that is very true. So to my friends who want to get on my videos and they're upset about the picture that I posted, oh well, I will not apologize for it, because at the moment, Black lives matter. They matter. Our media is showing you, obviously they don't. So for y'all that can sit around and say all lives matter, I want you to go put it on a poster and stand out on a corner somewhere. If we can get enough white people to show that all lives matter, maybe they'll stop killing our black brothers. Because obviously that's what it's going to take for the white people to get up and get tired of black people saying Black Lives Matter. So if y'all want it to stop, you get out there and do something about it. But what you're not going to do is get on my page with the foolishness. You will be deleted. You will be unfriended. I am not a racist. I grew up in Villa Park, Illinois, was the only black girl on an all-white cheerleading squad, so I had to learn how to deal with, and black people, you will not be successful in this world until you learn how to work with white people. But I want the white folks to really understand out there, black people are truly, we're doing we're doing as much as we can. Not all of us, but some of us are really doing as much as we can. And we can't help but get pissed off when we see situations where it's clear the black life didn't matter. For those of you questioning why was he running away, well, goddamn, because in the news that we've seen as of late, you could stand there, surrender to the cops, and still be killed. So for those of you that feel like all lives matter, if you want to put it on the poster, I will stand out there with you. But if you're not ready to do that, do not get on my page with it. Plain and simple. Plain and simple. You might have a black friend or two, and I'm not calling all white people racist, because y'all not. But for the ones who want to get on my page talking about all lives matter, show me in American history where all lives have mattered. Show me where there has been liberty and justice for all, like that Pledge of Allegiance we love to say. Excuse my French, because Sandy Speaks don't usually cuss. But I was really irritated by the responses to the post that I made earlier, because white people, if all lives mattered, would there need to be a hashtag for Black Lives Mattering? Think about that. Just truly think about that. Yes, black on black crime numbers are extremely high. Yes, they are, but that is because there are uneducated people who are hell-bent on self-extermination. I am not one of them. I am into building up my kings and queens. So for me, Black Lives Matter. And then subset, all lives matter. Take it or leave it. Sandy Speaks.
And that's a video that Sandra Bland, the 28-year-old African-American woman from Illinois who died in Texas police custody, posted on her Facebook page in April. Texas authorities say she killed herself in her jail cell, but Bland's family and friends are demanding answers. They don't believe that she would have committed suicide. We turn next to a young activist in Southern California who represents a growing number of people who are joining a burgeoning movement in the U.S. to demand justice for African Americans. Jasmine Richards is the founder of the Black Lives Matter Pasadena chapter. She has been active in speaking out about the police killing of Kendrick McDade, among others. Richards was arrested earlier this year for participating in an act of civil disobedience in Old Town Pasadena. She now faces a number of charges, including making terrorist threats. In late July, Richards and hundreds of other BLM activists are heading to Cleveland, Ohio for a national gathering. I spoke yesterday with Jasmine Richards at La Pintoresca Park in Pasadena, where she chairs the regular BLM meetings, and I asked her to share her story with me.
I actually got involved in the Black Lives Matter movement once we went to Ferguson, the Ferguson ride. It was life-changing. I experienced black love for the first time, and I was able to cry for the first time and heal. Before I was part of Black Lives Matter, I was actually sitting at this park just hanging out like all my friends over there. That's what I was doing at first. I really didn't have any drive. I had no self-respect. I had no love to give. And so now I'm actually trying to give back what Black Lives Matter has given me. Well, I got involved with Kendrick McDade's case once his mother, Anya Slaughter, reached out to me. I did an action at the Rose Parade, and I had his picture. I made a poster of his picture. And at the Occupy LAPD headquarters, his mom walked up to me and she said, "You're the one who had my son's face on the news. You remembered him." And from then on, I loved her. She's been my family because in her I've seen my mother, my own mom, who's lost her son. And I see how when they lose their children, they lose themselves. And she had to relearn how to write, relearn how to eat, like, you know what I mean? And it was like, that moved me. And I'm determined to not lose any more friends, not lose any more young men in my community or women. And I promised his mom. I promised his mom that I would get her justice, and I'm going to keep that promise. I grew up in Pasadena. We moved here when I was about 7. I have one brother who's deceased and 2 sisters, one sister who's deceased as well. I grew up on Los Robles in Orange Grove, which is actually down the street. They considered my neighborhood a zero tolerance zone. So even if we wanted to hang out in front of our apartment, we were considered a gang member. Um, my mom worked lots of hours, so the people on the outside of my community, which are considered the gang members, were my family. So I grew up lost and confused. I grew up around here searching for answers. I played basketball, but I didn't have anybody to show me how to go to college or the SATs or anything like that. So once my brother was killed, I just decided to quit everything. I graduated from PHS, but I didn't go any further after that. He was murdered on 73rd and Figueroa at 10 o'clock in the morning. A car pulled past him and said, "What gang are you from?" And he said, "I don't gang bang," and they killed him. I was 14, and my brother was like my father. Um, I handled it. I didn't handle it. I got into drugs. I got into drinking. Um, I had scholarships for basketball. I just quit basketball. I seen no more need to live because I'm like, you're just gonna get killed anyway. My mom, she has 26 years clean, and I thought she would relapse because of her son was murdered, but she kept going, kept it pushing. So my mom has been that motivation for me. I'm tired of putting my friends on my T-shirts. Um, I'm tired of having car washes for them because we don't know about insurance. I'm tired of putting them as tattoos on my arms. This is when my friend was born, and this is his death date. And I'm sick and tired. So um, my goal is to save lives by any means necessary, even if that means putting mine on the line. I think it's really funny because when I was out here causing trouble, getting into everything, I never got in trouble by the law. But once I picked up a bullhorn, I became a target. And that just showed me how powerful the woman and black woman's voice is. Because they're trying to stifle me. They're trying to keep me down. I've gotten fired from my job. I've gotten kicked out of my home. And I'm still here organizing. Um, it's just bullying. They're bullies. I was in Old Town. We did an action on March 24th. It was the anniversary of Kendrick McDade. So we shut Old Town down. We did a civil disobedience, a die-in. I don't know if anybody knows about Old Town, but that's Pasadena's main source of income. Um, we shut it down, so they were disturbed and mad. Criminal threats, terrorist threats, assault, trespassing, failure to comply with a peace officer, and failure to turn down amplified sound.
You're facing these charges in court, and it's really interesting to hear that they're putting a terrorism charge in there because a couple of weeks ago, a white supremacist murderer massacred 9 people, and the FBI says that what he did in killing 9 people was not terrorism. How did that make you feel?
Um, it didn't make me feel any type of way because I'm used to this now. It's like something that we're used to. We're I don't expect them to do anything. I don't expect them to value our lives. I'm not expecting them to do anything. So it didn't hurt me. It used to. But Melina Abdullah taught me, why does it hurt you? Why are you expecting them to do something? You know what I mean? They haven't this long, so stop expecting. It's crazy. When we shut down Old Town, they came at us in such a volatile way, and we didn't back down. I seen Miss Slaughter, which is Kendrick McDade's mother, take her power back in his little sister, and they got in the police's face and they let them know exactly how they felt. And so that right there, that empowers me. That I can't even explain the feeling. It's like a feeling that starts within your toes and it rises up and it goes into your spirit, and then something just comes out of you like a lion, and it feels so good. It's like stuff that was deep, deep, deep down and just was bursting to come out. That explains anything. I've been locked up before, and they let me be around people. When I was locked up this time, they put a sign on my cell that said newsworthy, and I was completely in solitude, alone. When I went to court, they took me another route, which they have an underground tunnel in Pasadena. I didn't know nothing about that, but they used that underground tunnel. Then they took me to Linwood. They told people that I had got out from Pasadena, but that was a lie. They took me to Linwood, and the process to go into Linwood is just despicable. You have to like strip. It's violating. It's so violating to be a woman in jail. And they tried to demean me. They tried to take away my pride. But when I left jail, I had people saying Asada. You know what I mean? I had people in jail saying, hey, we're going to look you up on Facebook. And they really added me. You know, and so what they meant for bad, it really turned out to good because I activated people in jail. Well, my trial starts in September 28th, 2 days before my birthday. I'm going to still just keep organizing. There's nothing I can do. I know that they want to get something out of me, whether it's probation, whether it's time. They're going to do and get something. So I'm prepared for that.
They're trying to make an example of you?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what I'm doing actually is I'm teaching my youngsters how to be self-sufficient because most of them actually sleep in this park that we're sitting in right now. Most of those young people that you pass by, they sleep here. So they're homeless. Right now we have free lunches going on, and this is how I think we help. We empower them. We teach them that, hey, life is not, you don't have to give up because people are here for you. And when you do feel like giving up, you have somebody who you could call, you know. And TJ, he's one of the people that will tell you. He made me really notice the work that I do is important because he's like, we never had somebody call us and make sure we're okay or make sure that we ate. And so that was really important to me. And so he let me know that we got to keep doing it. What I know is going to come out of Cleveland is going to be so much love. Some of my people have never even been out of the state, out of the city. So this is going to be like an eye-opener. We're going to be around people who are nurturing, loving. So what's going to come out of this is so many warriors and leaders. I was walking in Hollywood one day, and this lady from France, she seen I had a Black Lives Matter bulletproof shirt on. So she said, France is concerned about Black Lives Matter. She said, can I take a picture? So she took a picture of me, then found me on Facebook, and then donated to the Crowd Rise. So it's like, yeah, people care. Financial solidarity is very important because, like I said before, I lost my job doing this now. So I completely have nothing. So I'm depending on people now, people power. And so a lot of people, they don't want to come out and be an organizer and help out. So help out with your money because it's poverty over here. We're hungry. We are eating noodle dinners and we have no one else. So we're depending on people who say they love us. I just want to say Black Lives Matter has changed my life. And for all those who don't think that we're a movement for all those who think that this is just a moment, they have another thing coming because this is a movement and it's motivating the masses.
If you want to express your financial solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement, you can donate to their travel funds. A CrowdRise campaign for Jasmine and her fellow activists can be found at crowdrise.com/Black Lives Matter Pasadena. Jasmine Richards is the founder of Black Lives Matter Pasadena. This is Uprising. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Uprising. I'm Sonali Kohatkar. Video footage of U.S. police beating and killing ordinary unarmed people, particularly African Americans, is shockingly common these days. But less visible and almost as shocking is how police are using the internet to entrap and arrest people based on their social media posts. The well-earned public anger against police in response to the videos of brutality have fueled online expressions and sometimes threats. After the fatal shootings of New York officers Wen Jianlu and Rafael Ramos late last year, many law enforcement agencies began treating online threats as evidence and probable cause for arrests and even terrorism-related charges. Black and brown Americans were predictably the most likely to be targeted. Many of the charges haven't held up in court. Joining me now is Raven Rakia. She is a freelance journalist focused on policing and prisons, and she's written about this issue on Alternate. Welcome to Uprising, Raven.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, first let's talk about New York, since that's where the two officers who I mentioned were killed, and there was an escalation in arrests around online threats to police. But this, as you write about, goes back to a police policy under former police commissioner Raymond Kelly called Operation Crew Cut, where police were targeting and in some cases almost entrapping black youth involved in so-called crews, which are not actually gangs but are being treated as gangs. Can you sort of give us this background in New York?
Yeah, so even before two police officers were shot, Operation Crew Cut has been in existence since at least 2012 when Ray Kelly announced it. And underneath this operation, police officers are encouraged to make profiles on Facebook and friend 16 to 22-year-olds. Usually the catfishing profiles they make are of pretty girls, and they'll friend them to watch their Facebook statuses. In addition to that, they will get warrants to surveil these people's Facebook messages. So the private Facebook messages they're having with their friends, with the people they grew up with, the police are actually watching them and using those messages to build a conspiracy case against them.
And so you and others have covered the story. The Verge did a detailed piece on this, of these two brothers in New York, in Harlem, Jelani Henry, who was essentially picked up because of his Facebook posts. His brother had already been incarcerated, and they were accusing these kids essentially of being in gangs, but they were in what are called crews. And this was prior to Facebook posts being sort of this even newer and bigger trend of people being picked up for making threats against police. But this sort of is part one of the story. Tell us a little bit about Jelani Henry and why he landed up in jail for being active on Facebook.
Right. So the NYPD are using this excuse of crews to attack anti-gang activity. This is what they call it. But crews are basically kids who are friends with each other, who have grown up in the same public housing. So basically it's friends. They're teenagers who have friends. But because they're low income and they grew up in black and brown neighborhoods in New York, they're labeled as crews. And so that gives the NYPD an excuse to surveil them. And it's often kids who, by the time when they're beginning to be surveilled, they're around 12 years old, some as young as 10.
Wow.
They're usually around 12 to 14 years old. They usually haven't committed a crime yet, but because they're affiliated with maybe older people in the crew, or older people in their public housing neighborhood, because everyone knows each other, they start getting surveilled. And then, so for Jelani, it was basically guilt by association, right? He liked the wrong things on Facebook, people bragging about beating someone up, or discussing with someone in a private Facebook message whether or not they should get a gun because they were just robbed or they were just beaten up, so they want to protect themselves. These types of conversations were criminalized, and the people were charged with conspiracy charges, which means that they conspired to commit a crime. They agreed with someone else to commit a crime. Whether or not they actually did it, they can be arrested and charged with the same amount of time, usually 10 to 30 years, for these conspiracy charges.
And now this the same policy of digging online on people's social media accounts has been harnessed in an even wider way to arrest those who are threatening police or who might be glorifying violence against police. Can you tell us how New York's model that started with Operation Crew Cut has now become more commonplace even in other cities?
Sure. So Operation Crew Cut with New York, so it happens that there are raids and arrests every few months, and it'll be like a different public housing. Dozens to hundreds of people get arrested over these surveillance operations. And this actually Operation Crew Cut, even before the claim of threats against cops, there's also a similar operation in Baltimore and a similar operation in New Orleans. So it's not just in New York that this is happening. It's definitely spread out to other places. After, of course, 2 cops were killed, there was then basically a crackdown on people speaking about it on social media. And so it went from anyone saying the chickens are coming home to roost, basically, to someone writing an anti-cop song lyric, to someone saying to someone joking about replicating the crime. And all these people were arrested as well throughout the country.
One young man, a 17-year-old, I understand, from Fort Worth, Texas, named Montre Tolliver, was arrested. You write, he was arrested and charged with a terroristic threat for posting a tweet that said, "Should I do it? They don't care for a black man anyways." And this was alongside a photo that appeared to show a gun pointing at a police car. But I understand that the gun was found to be sort of faked. It was a photoshopped image, and this was, taken to be a threat. He was arrested.
Right, and there are many issues about this in general. Even if the gun was real, this wouldn't constitute a threat by case law in this country. So the gun that ended up being fake. It was like some sort of BB gun or a play gun. There was no threat that he was actually pointing at a person. It was just a car, and the actual words that don't constitute a threat either, because what constitutes a threat in this country is a specific place or time, and be reasonable that you're actually going to commit the crime. So asking a question, should I do this, isn't actually a threat.
So they're targeting a lot of young kids. Now, of course, when you're under the age of 18, you're not always thinking about what you might be saying online. A lot of kids, will speak out in anger. I mean, parents know that when kids scream, "I hate you," to them, that they're being kids. And so when kids who have access to social media are expressing their legitimate anger against police on social media, police are treating this, and some parts of our legal system are treating this as a legitimate reason to lock these kids up.
Exactly. And, kids make very rash decisions. And of course, 16 to 18-year-olds aren't going to be thinking that police are surveilling them on social media. They're like, the police aren't looking for me. They have real crime to crack down on, apparently. But that's actually not true. For some reason, these young kids, teenagers and young adults, are their prime target of who they're surveilling on social media. And so, yes, they get locked up for saying rash, for expressing anger, for saying rash things that they don't actually mean. And prosecutors tend to take them seriously. And I think most of them know that this doesn't constitute a legal threat. But the problem is that most of these kids aren't going to have the money to go after them and say this was an unconstitutional arrest. Most of these kids have been in the criminal system before because their entire communities are criminalized and and so usually these kids end up taking a plea deal if they're indicted. They'll end up taking a plea deal because they don't know their rights, they can't afford a lawyer, and they just want to get out of jail and they can't pay bail. So that's what the prosecutors are hoping for, basically.
And you wrote in your piece on Alternet about one case, Yassine Shirin, who turned himself in after the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office put out a call for his arrest because of a Facebook status. He was 16 years old, no criminal record, and his mother couldn't afford the $200,000 bail that they put on him.
Mm-hmm. That's another thing. The bails were extremely high, and even the lawyers expressed that in court, that these bails are obscene for what the accusation is. And some judges even came out and admitted that the bails were high because of the climate, quote unquote, and because 2 cops had just gotten killed. So they're not even hiding the fact that they were cracking down and being very punitive for little matters. And the good thing is Yassine Shirin was not indicted, but if he was, his mother couldn't afford his bail. It's very plausible that it would have ended in a plea deal, and he would have had a felony on his record for something he was not guilty of.
And he was sent to Rikers. This is a 16-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there is so much hate speech online. We know that white supremacist groups, especially, constantly spout their hate online, like Dylan Roof did. Are they being targeted in the same way?
There's no evidence of it from what I can see. So yeah, it's very obvious about who is being targeted and what threat they actually pose. So young kids who they don't even have the means to go through with their threats. They say they have nothing that makes it constitute an actual legal threat that the police should be threatened from. However, they're targeted to a greater extent than actual white supremacists online. There are plenty of white supremacist websites where hate speech and threats happen. And the way that our legal system works is low-income people are targeted, and low-income and Black people are targeted mainly because they have less resources to defend themselves in court. And it usually comes with a win on the prosecutor's side.
And of course, we should also mention how social media has become a very important tool of expression, of activism, of peer-to-peer communications within Black communities. Black Twitter is a phenomenon now that is, a source of important expression, people's opinions. The digital divide has in large part been closed. And that has been a very empowering tool in the hands of people. But of course, when folks are being targeted for using that tool, even if they are letting off steam, it has a chilling effect, doesn't it?
Right. And they're basically using these instances as an example. They're saying, we will not take dissenting speech against police officers. We will crack down on it when we see it. And so they're using an example to show these kids what it means when they dissent against police officers and say something that's unpopular, but also for the rest of society to say, we're not going to tolerate this dissent in this way. And I mean, I think it also, when you look at Black Twitter and its effect on Black Lives Matter, it really makes you think, how much are we being surveilled as we're speaking with each other online. And so activists should definitely be more careful about what is put online.
Raven, what are First Amendment lawyers saying about this trend? I mean, shouldn't social media posts be protected free speech?
Yeah, that's what I was saying before about what constitutes a legal threat. And it goes way further than just expressing your opinions or even saying you're going to do harm against police officers. There has to be a specific threat with a specific date and time for them where they're supposed to even take it seriously, let alone where someone's supposed to be found guilty of threatening an officer.
And I also understand that in non-online cases, in cases that don't involve social media, that using, say, profanity into the face of a police officer is actually protected speech. Often, of course, if you mouth off to a cop, he or she will find a reason to arrest you anyway. But cases, I understand, have shown, and there's been legal precedents, that you can use profanity to a cop's face because you have the right. You have the right to tell them you hate them because because the group they represent has been kind of murderous.
Exactly, and that's why First Amendment lawyers I spoke to also said that this should translate onto social media, where now that sometimes there isn't much precedent about what can be said on social media, it gives the police ammo to basically crack down on literally anything. Versus whether if it was in person, it would definitely be protected speech.
And I've brought this issue up time and again on my program, and I just the double standards just confound me that Dylan Roof killed 9 people in a church, talked about how much of a white supremacist he was, and the FBI has not been able to bring itself to apply a terrorism charge as yet, and yet we see charges of terrorism are related to terrorism being slapped onto people who are active in the Black Lives Matter movement, including people who are simply young kids making these threats online, right? How many of I know you cite some cases where kids are basically being accused of terrorism?
Yeah, the main charge was making a terroristic threat. So it's a terrorism charge. It's a felony that went up to 7 years in prison, and that was at least 5 cases like that, probably more. But because of the way the court system works, they're not transparent about how many of these charges were coming about. So I know specifically about 5 cases, and it's kind of absurd, but it shows America. It shows what America is looking for when they talk about terrorism, right? Kids talking about how they don't like cops on social media as terrorism, but a white person killing 9 black people in a church isn't.
Finally, Raven, in the last minute of our conversation, President Obama this week has sort of intensified his campaign on doing some criminal justice reform and admitting that we've locked up far too many people of color. Even Bill Clinton, in his speech to the NAACP, admitted his law, maybe too little too late for him to express remorse. But do you think there's momentum at the government level to address this issue, even if cops haven't caught up?
I think there's momentum to address it, to sort of quell the Black Lives Matter movement that's been happening. I don't know if this will culminate in actual action to fix the mass incarceration issue. The way that Bill Clinton and President Obama and even Hillary Clinton have been talked about is a very lukewarm. It's the same conversation that we've been having for years. Mandatory minimums, our drug laws are bad. But it's not getting to the heart of the problem, and it's not expanding into all the different ways the criminal justice system has affected the Black community in America.
Raven, I want to thank you so much for joining us today, and we will link to your article on Alternate from our website later today. Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you for having me.
My guest is Raven Rakia. She's a freelance journalist focusing on policing and prisons, and she has written for Alternate. This is Uprising. Anna Buss is our assistant producer, and our technical director, Christian Beck, is our production coordinator. Kiana Turner is our visual editor and research intern. Teddy Robinson is our audio engineer. Special thanks to Jonathan Alexander for technical assistance. Annie Mendoza is our social media coordinator. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/uprising with Sonali. Your subscription sustains the TV production of Uprising, and it's very, very affordable, so do consider joining. Our website is uprisingwithsonali.com. Our theme music is by Quetzal. I'm Sonali Kolhatkar, host and executive producer of Uprising. Have a wonderful weekend. I'll see you Monday.